Wi-Fi hotspot unavailable.
And we're off. We're going to go get a cup of joe. Well, sort of a peach green tea lemonade, actually. And I'm going to film it just because I have this swanky new lens. I should use it. Alright, so sport for now. So we don't want to attract the attention of our friends, the constable, who sometimes likes to hang out down here. Make sure people are not exceeding the speed limit. However, very fuel efficient, but it's fun. It's not exactly hooting, it's just, enjoying the car a little bit. The problem is, the car makes the best noises when you rev it. And unfortunately, doing so is more or less remote. Hard enough right now. Smell oil burning. So I'm going to put it back down and play on Sport. Sport Plus is really nice driving mode. Car gets really nice and sort of tight and super sort of in a tighter gearing. Just kind of keeps a higher baseline RPM. Anyway, won't use, I think, anything beyond 5th gear. We'll go to hard limiter. Sport Plus is a lot more forgiving, but still much more engaging to drive than regular mode. Regular mode isn't all that interesting. Regular mode, however, is excellent fuel efficiency. So regular mode on the highway, assuming you're on those highways where you cruise at 70, 75 miles an hour, you will find yourself, at least in this car, doing around 32 to 34 miles a mile per gallon. 34 miles, let's call it 33 miles or 32 miles per gallon, something like that. I think it gets closer to 34, but I'm not entirely sure. But that's, assuming you're in highway, no stop and go. That's your best possible scenario. Anyway, so in normal mode, the car's in its most soft settings with no grab. So nice for fuel efficiency, nice for driving when you just want to be low key and you don't want the car to rev out much. From normal into sports, a sport takes basically takes the car and tightens it, so it makes the RPMs a lot more, instead of, trying to constantly get sub 2,000 RPMs and saying, ooh, let's have between, 3 and 6, and it'll try to keep you more in that 2.5, 3.5 range. So it'll shift less quickly, more aggressively. And it will also engage the butterfly valve to the sport exhaust, so it has the constant brap. You'll get the brap only when you really hammer it in normal mode, because there's a valve that keeps it from making noise until higher up in the rev range. Anyway, it's a beautiful car. So here we are on beautiful Rebel Scum Road, driving quietly and carefully. Turn the high beams down. Just enjoying the road, really. Such a gorgeous place. I love this road in all seasons. This road would make an amazing rally stage with the correct modifications. And that's enough of that. This is a popular walking destination, so I do not much care for moving out here. There's an adorable older couple. Gosh, I don't know how old they are, but they're tiny. I guess it's a tiny Asian couple, and they must be at least in their 80s. I would say 80s or 90s. They are both adorable. Because they're very consistent. So it's this old man who's always bundled up, and he has these two walking sticks, canes, sort of, but sort of high tech, those fancy walking poles. And then there's this woman who I'm assuming is his spouse. I could be wrong on that. My apologies if it's wrong. But she is out walking with him every day, and she is making sure, I think, that, he doesn't wander off, get hit by a car, whatever. She probably has her wits about her a bit more than he does, is what I'm guessing, because it does look like she has a very nurturing kind of watchful relationship with her. Then there's Mr. Cross-country skier, right? So there's this guy who comes out and trains for his Nordic skiing, I guess, or cross-country skiing on these cross-country rollerblade skis, with cross-country skis with, I guess, a rollerblade wheel on each end or something like that. So for all intents and purposes, he's cross-country skiing. So it's his workout, so he's a very fit gentleman. You see him, and then there's the ladies who come out and walk their dogs in a group. There's just a whole bunch of people. Anyway, this is the way to Starbucks coming from my house. And then we take a break here. here, which we can maybe make a little bit of noise. I don't know if the cops. No, there's too many people. It's not really time for it yet. Just too many people around. Plus, this is a fire station up here, so in out of respect to the fire station, probably best to not be an idiot around the fire station. Anyway, it's residential here. There is no good place in Central Jersey really to go driving. Yes, there are plenty of places to go driving and enjoy the drive. There are no good places to go driving quickly, other than racetracks, fortunately, which we have a number. There's NJP, there's probably many other options that you can do things at. I know there's drifting that happens, or at least used to happen over in E-Town. There's Wall Township that has an oval. So there's a few different things, but and there's actually plenty of really nice drives. Like I like to go out in the car and go drive up towards the Sourland Mountains, right? And out in the farm country there. There's just a lot of beautiful places in Jersey, and it's also very varied. Very varied in terms of landscape, right? You've got, I guess the extremes are kind of crazy. You've got the Pine Barrens, which is just this weird alien landscape of sand and pine trees with water. Hard to describe. And then you've got sort of the swampy, cranberry boggy areas also down in South Jersey. Got parts of Jersey that feel like you're in the mountains, like in Appalachia, really, really, really remote, very rural feeling. And then there's, of course, skier kind of mountainy places too. There's just all sorts of interesting geology in New Jersey, apparently. I remember I took geology in college, and we did a bunch of field trips around New Jersey. And they're like, you're very fortunate. New Jersey has every single different style tape that exists in the continental United States, this, that, and the other thing. And yes, we have very, very, very old land here, relatively speaking, geology-wise. The mountains have been worn down over time as compared to our, pals on the West Coast. East Coast mountains are much, much older. We were much less recently geologically active. Although there's some weird little pockets of odd geological activity in the Northeast that have happened. There was this oddball period where I can't remember when it was, but it was documented, I think, by reputable sources affiliated with government agencies, having to do with repeated quakes and tremors in the Northeast for some extended period, but not a very, very long period, like a period of months or perhaps even weeks, where there were just many earthquakes, multiple a day, frequently, many small, but some considerable, apparently. And I did feel an earthquake in New York. I was at the office. We did an earthquake. My building shook. Old brick building, but it is Burger Stone or whatever that they make these things out of. Hang on, let's get her a drink. Thank you. Have a good one. Alright. Yay, they got me the little round sticker thing. So my wife's coffee won't spill all over the place. At least in theory. And I think we're going to take this paper towel, sort of wedge the coffee in here, seal the deal. You can't see any of this, but trust me, there's an exciting, really interesting drama that's unfolding between me in the Starbucks coffee cup in the front seat of the 911. All right, just FYI, I have the sunroof open, and it is very cold according to the thermometer. Famous SAS parachute Superman guy, probably. I'm not making shit up. I like to think that this guy was like, at one point in his life, some sort of like badass SAS dude, because he makes his living flying planes for well-connected Saudis with lots and lots of money, and seems to have a military background. So, you know, the other two guy probably was some sort of man, a soldier of distinction, and you know, he's obviously a well-spoken fellow. He's probably educated, which means he was an officer, and he's English, which means therefore he probably went to university, because they probably have the same thing where you have to be. Anyway, long story short, this guy. Let's see. All right, so we are currently in. Let's see what we are. In Sport Plus. Why that was so loud. So Sport Plus gives you all sorts of grunt, and it'll bang gears quickly, or not too quickly. It'll hold the gears if you ask it to do so. In other words, if you hit accelerator hard and hold it hard, so I didn't even do it first there. I was only at like 75% on the throttle, so it really didn't give us all of it. Anyway, it's a little terrifying the first time when you actually let the car open up, because it just, you know, it's a little bit like, I guess, not the first time, but it's a little bit like when you start getting competent enough at go-karting, and let's say you try a X30, or I don't know, a Rotax or something, you know, 125cc or 100cc tag, like a K100 even, KPP. Anyway, the X30 pulls. I mean, and it pulls. Mine, I think, would hit limiter around 16,200 RPM, which I would hit at the end of the straight, back straight at Englishtown. So, you know, depending upon gearing, you're hitting up to 72-ish miles an hour on most tracks. Yeah, somewhere between, I'd say, top speeds of 60 and 75, depending upon high tight, twisty, or long, whatever the track is. Anyway, first time you feel, or at least first time I remember feeling the car pull. You know, bear in mind, I've never really had any motorsport experience other than, well, nothing really. So, yeah, I drove Jim's two-strokes out at his track in California. Those were, however, detuned 100 cc's, making less power, you know, sort of set up for longevity. So they weren't screamers, you know, they didn't rev out super high. And plus, you know, we were brand new, so we didn't know what the hell we were doing. And the truth of the matter is, in order to rev an engine out, you have to be, generally speaking, good enough in the driving part to be able to get it that high. And in a single speed engine, you know, if you're geared correctly, your corner exit to end of straight So there's not going to be a lot of room for error, in terms of finding the rightish gearing. So anyway, long story short, when you hit the power band, and I'm told it's like this on dirt bikes, when you hit the power band, it keeps pulling and pulling, and it makes a even wickeder and wickeder and wickeder noise. It screams, as you go through 14,000 RPM, it's like, wah! You've got the intake and the exhale. I will shut up now. We are on the way home. And this is the reverse direction of Scum Road. The red barn is right up here to my right. And then I'll be quiet and we'll just go the rest of the way. Part here is the tunnel of trees. Just some calm drive. Enjoying the road. I should have a sip of my drink. Shit. And thus endeth Rebel Scum Road, which comes out here and bumps up to Cherry Valley Road, aka, no, we need to come up with a name for Cherry Valley, which I will. Alright, so we're going to take a right here on Cherry Valley, and then we're going to go take a left onto Great. So I need to come up with some names for the rest of the memorable roads. But I think for now, Rebel Scum is the only one that gets the cool name, because, well, frankly, not bad. So, I think that gives you a taste of what this car can do. You can feel it starting to want to stand up on its toes there. It's pretty neat. But the problem with this car is you just can't drive it anywhere like that, other than at a track. And even then, I'm not going to drive it like that at a track because A, I don't know how to, and B, it's a very expensive toy. Then I'd rather go do that in go-karts. And also, when you screw up in go-karts, you don't A, wreck a $150,000 car, or B, don't kill yourself, hurt yourself, or somebody else. So, yeah, I don't have a whole lot of tolerance for bullshit on public roads because that's not what they're there for. There's a contract between drivers, which is, hey, I trust that you're not going to be an asshole, and I trust that you're going to be transparent. To take this out of Sport Plus. There's a big old bump right here. So let's see. There's no good way to avoid it. See, the car's much less interesting in sport. Like, it had to... The beauty of the PDK is that it's a smart system. So, like, if you're in Sport Plus or Sport and you want it to be a little bit more or less peppy, A, you can go in and use the paddles and override. B, you can also play with how you're using the throttle, right? So, you know how in a go-kart you're modulating with your right foot. Let's say you're driving oval or you're driving whatever. Your speed is being controlled and your turn angle a little bit by your throttle. Well, sort of the same thing here, right? But to a much less extent. Anyway, you can make the car shift down by giving it a little bit of a stab, right? And depending upon how aggressive that stab is, you're either going to go all the way to the floor and hit, I guess there's a kick down, which will take it, I guess, all the way to the lowest possible gear that will not grenade the engine. And then I guess you can get it to just downshift one gear, just by being a little bit playful with the throttle. So anyway, you get the hang of it. I find myself almost never using the paddles, to be honest with you. I just like putting it in Sport for most driving. Sport Plus for, a little tiny bit here and there because there's almost nowhere you can drive in Sport Plus that's pleasant because I don't want to be in fourth gear doing, 4,500 RPM. Fuel and making that much noise and blah blah blah. So Sport is a much better option for 90% of your driving. And then for 10% of your driving, at least in my case, which is highway, I'll put it just in regular, or it's snowing or something like that. Although I've been driving it in a combination of, I had it normal in the worst conditions, pure ice basically, but also messed around with Sport. When Nick and I took the big cars out in the snow, heavy snow, falling snow, unplowed snow, we had to disengage traction control, and it seemed to me like Sport mode was more fun in let's call it a foot or so of unplowed heavy snow in the SUVs, as opposed to the off-road mode, right, which I think was more of like probably a lock diff or something, where does something with the differential, probably doesn't allow the rear wheels to spin differently or something. Anyway, I played with a few different things like sand mode, gravel mode, and in general, even with defeating the traction control, I didn't really feel like, I felt like sometimes it was still a bit present. Overall, I was much more successful with traction control off. The 911, however, is hilarious. This car is hilarious on ice. When it's snowing, this is not a good car to be in, or at least this particular version of it is not a good car to be in. Here we go into my street. Okay, so there's still plenty of ice here, as you can see. Let's make the spin a little. Hi. First one. Alright, let's park the car then. We'll call it a night. That's for dinner. Let's see, my son has moved an electric heater into the garage. I suppose to keep his beloved car battery warm. Alright, so let's close the sunroof. Come on, you. Alright, are we good to go? Alright, take care.